I spent 2.5 years being invisible in the world's most expensive restaurant. I spoke 8 languages, but I kept the door locked until I saw a $200 million lie written on a piece of paper. That's the day I stopped being a ghost and started a war. Before we go any further, if you've ever been overlooked in a room where you were the most capable person present, this story was written for you. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell, because the rest of what happened that night, the tea house, the card with 4 Japanese characters, and the words that changed everything, you don't want to find out you missed it. The trick was to move like air. Imani had perfected it over 2.5 years at the pinnacle. The slight forward tilt, the measured steps, the eyes that registered everything and revealed nothing. Atlanta's elite didn't want to see the hands that filled their glasses. They wanted magic. Seamless, invisible magic. Tonight, the Sakura room hummed with the particular tension of men deciding the fate of things they didn't build. Table 12. She'd memorized it before her shift started. Hiroshi Tanaka, CEO, flanked by his legal counsel Kenji Matsumoto. Across from them, Richard Bradshaw, the kind of man whose smile arrived before his face did, and his consortium of tailored suits. Between both worlds, Marcus Whitfield, interpreter, prestigious enough that no one questioned him. Imani moved toward the table with the sake. Aisha, 3 tables over. She caught her eye briefly, the small acknowledgement they'd developed across 2.5 years of shared shifts, a glance that said, "Big table tonight." And then they both returned to the work of being invisible. She didn't listen. That was the rule she'd made herself. Languages lived in her like instruments she'd locked in a room, present, silent, untouchable. 8 of them. She kept the door shut. She set the first glass down. Tanaka looked up. Not the reflexive glance of a man acknowledging furniture. He looked, steady, unhurried, as though he had decided she was worth the attention. A tattoo curved at his wrist, disappearing beneath his cuff. A man who contained contradictions. Their eyes met for exactly 2 seconds. She moved to the next glass. It was nothing. It meant nothing. Except that she couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at her like she was actually standing there. $23 in her checking account. $6,800 due at Morningside Memory Care by Friday, where her father Kwame sat in a room that smelled of antiseptic and forgetting, where some days he called her Neka, her middle name, her true name. And some days he called her nothing at all. She needed this job. She kept her eyes down. She moved like air. It was Kenji who broke her open. He leaned toward Tanaka, voice low, and the words came out in clean, precise Japanese. Kore wa kangaerarete ita joken to chigaimasu. These conditions differ from what was agreed upon. Imani's mind caught it before she could stop it. The same way a musician can't unhear a wrong note. Clean. Involuntary. The door she kept locked swung wide and something flooded through. Japanese, Mandarin, Korean, Arabic, Portuguese, French, Spanish. 8 rivers that had once made her formidable now rushing against walls she'd spent over 2 years building. She was 32 years old. She had been the youngest UN chief interpreter in the organization's history. She had sat in rooms where the wrong word could fracture treaties. She had held the weight of entire nations in the gap between languages, and she had never once dropped it. Until someone decided she had. Marcus Whitfield smoothed his lapel and turned to Bradshaw. "Mr. Matsumoto confirms the Japanese delegation is satisfied with the current framework." Imani's hand tightened on her tray. Satisfied. The man had said differs from what was agreed. The distance between those 2 translations was not an error. It was architecture. Someone had built it deliberately, brick by careful brick, and Imani recognized the blueprint because she had once been buried beneath one exactly like it. She stood at the edge of the room. Her survival instinct said, "Walk away." Her mind, the mind that had spent years learning to hold truth in 8 languages simultaneously, said something else entirely. She stood very still, caught between 2 versions of herself: the woman who had learned to disappear, and the woman she used to be. Victoria Chen had the kind of elegance that made you feel chosen when she noticed you. Imani remembered the first day at the UN, the marble corridors, the dizzying sense of consequence, and Victoria extending her hand with a warmth that felt like endorsement. "You're extraordinary," she'd said. "I've read your evaluations. We're lucky to have you." For 2 years, Imani believed her. She interpreted Victoria's most delicate sessions, trade negotiations with stakes high enough to make the air feel thin. She was precise, invisible in the best way, the conduit through which understanding passed without distortion. She was proud of that. She'd earned it. Then came Geneva, a trade bloc negotiation that nearly collapsed into an international incident. Someone had introduced language into the proceedings that contradicted prior agreements, subtle, surgical mistranslations that sent both delegations into structured misunderstanding. The investigation pointed to the chief interpreter. The evidence pointed to Imani. Victoria Chen testified with composed grief. Documentation ready, voice steady, eyes full of reluctant certainty. "I wish I were wrong," she told the panel. "I wish I were." Imani lost her certification in March, her reputation by April. By summer, she understood what had actually happened. Corporate interests had paid Victoria to sabotage the talks and needed a body to absorb the fall. They chose the young black woman who'd risen too fast through rooms that had never expected her. Nobody came. She fought for 8 months until the money ran out, until her father's memory began its slow, terrible departure. A decline she has never stopped believing the scandal accelerated, stress wearing through him like water through stone. She became a server. She learned to move like air. She locked 8 languages behind a door and told herself it was survival. Standing now at the edge of the Sakura room, she understood it had always been a grave. Kenji Matsumoto spoke again. 3 concerns, laid out in careful Japanese, each one a small, precise alarm. He was thorough, the kind of thoroughness born from having watched something go wrong before. He recited the original agreed terms as he went, holding them against what the document now said. Clause 14. The IP transfer language had shifted from licensed to permanent. His voice was controlled but precise. The original agreement had used licensed use, he said, not ownership in perpetuity. A single word carrying the weight of everything Tanaka had built. The revenue split. The document read 65-35, where they had negotiated and shaken hands on 50-50. The board control language. What had been structured as a partnership in preliminary talks had been quietly rewritten into something that looked from the outside like partnership and from the inside like acquisition. The deal, Kenji noted, valued at $200 million. 3 concerns, expressed clearly, expressed in good faith. Marcus Whitfield translated them into silence. "The Japanese delegation is satisfied," he told Bradshaw. "They're ready to proceed." Imani set down the sake tray. Her hands were steady. She noticed that. Some distant part of her observed it the way you observe weather. Information, nothing more. Her hands were steady. Her face was composed. And somewhere behind her ribs, something was pulling itself upright after more than 2 years on its knees. She knew this pattern. She had lived inside it. Language weaponized so cleanly that the victim couldn't protest because the protest itself would be translated into acquiescence, their own words turned against them. The very instrument of truth, made into the instrument of harm. Tanaka was about to sign something he didn't know he was signing. "I was him once," she thought. "Someone lied in my name, rewrote what I said into what I never meant, and no one stopped it." She looked at her hands. Still steady. Not again. 30 seconds. She counted them afterward, though in the moment they stretched into something geological, layered with everything she'd compressed into silence. Her father's voice first. Neka, speak true. Her Igbo middle name worn smooth by his use of it, the name he reached for when he wanted her real self. Not her performative one. She hadn't heard it in months. She heard it now. Then Victoria. The composed grief. The documentation. The panel. The understanding that institutions would rather consume you than correct themselves. Then, over 2 years. Invisible. Small. Surviving. Aisha appeared at her elbow, reading her the way only someone who'd worked beside her for 2.5 years could. Don't, she said quietly. Imani. You need this job. She did. She looked at Tanaka, pen moving toward paper. She looked at Bradshaw's smile. The smile of a man who had never once doubted the world would arrange itself around him. She looked at Marcus, the lie still warm on his lips. I didn't lose my voice, she thought. Someone took it. She handed Aisha the tray. Time to take it back. The walk across the Sakura room took 11 steps. She counted those too. Each one deliberate, each one a door she was walking through and not coming back from. The carpet absorbed her footsteps. The conversation continued around her. She crossed the distance between who she had been for 2.5 years and who she had been before that, and when she reached Tanaka's chair, she was neither of those women entirely. She was something that hadn't existed yet. Tanaka-san, gomen nasai. The room didn't stop. It shattered. Into silence, then eruption. Anata no tsuyakusha wa uso o tsuite imasu. Your interpreter is lying to you. Bradshaw's voice. What the hell? Marcus rising from his chair, color leaving his face. 2 consortium members reaching for phones. The particular chaos of powerful men encountering the one variable they hadn't priced in. Tanaka didn't move. He looked at her with those same steady eyes from the sake order. Unhurried, she decided, and said one word. Tsuzukete. Continue. So she did. In Japanese, clean and precise, she laid it out. Clause 14, the permanent transfer versus the license terms agreed in preliminary negotiations. The revenue split, 65-35 dressed as the 50-50 they'd shaken hands on. The board control language that transformed partnership into acquisition if you knew where to look. Kenji Matsumoto leaned forward. Kanojo wa Tadasha. She is correct. Bradshaw said her name didn't matter. So she told him what it was. Former UN chief interpreter, 8 languages. I know exactly what you're doing because someone did it to me. The room rearranged itself around that sentence. Tanaka rose from his chair and bowed, formal, deliberate, the gesture of a man who knew precisely what he was communicating. Marcus was dismissed. Bradshaw's consortium gathered their folders with the tight efficiency of a retreat. When Tanaka thanked her, it was in Japanese. She answered in kind. His legal counsel Kenji had already turned to a colleague, voice low and purposeful, the particular tone of someone beginning a process rather than ending a conversation. Marcus would not be walking away from this cleanly. Her manager Raymond found her in the corridor. She was already removing her apron. You're finished here, he said. Yes, she agreed. The strange thing was the relief. It moved through her like a window opening, cool and sudden and clarifying. She had expected grief. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, like herself. Aisha was waiting outside with her jacket and a look that held both fear and something that might have been admiration if she'd let it fully form. What do you do now? She asked. I don't know yet, Imani said, and meant it without terror, which was new. Atlanta at night received her. The warm dark, the distant traffic, the city's indifferent aliveness. She walked 2 blocks before she became aware of the footsteps behind her. Professional. Deliberate. the kind that wanted to be heard. Two men materialized at her periphery, the kind of men Bradshaw kept on payroll specifically for conversations that couldn't happen in conference rooms. "Mr. Bradshaw would like you to understand discretion," one said. "As a professional courtesy." She stood very still. Then, movement. Efficient and decisive, from across the street. Tanaka's security. She recognized the precision of it, appearing in the specific way of people who had been there for some time, waiting. Words were exchanged briefly. The two men weighed the mathematics of the situation and found themselves outmatched. They left. Something fell at her feet. A business card, plain, no company name, just a number. She picked it up and dialed. It rang once. "Are you harmed?" Tanaka's voice, stripped of the formal register, direct. "No. Those men will not approach you again." A pause, brief, but weighted. "You gave me something I had stopped expecting." She didn't ask what. She understood. There is a tea house," he said. "Hana no Yume. Little 5 points. Tomorrow, if you are willing." Another pause. "Please." The word landed differently than she expected. Not the please of a powerful man accustomed to getting what he asked for. The please of someone making themselves deliberately vulnerable. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She stood in the Atlanta night, unheld and unbroken, and for the first time in years that felt like possibility rather than loss. She went to see her father first. Kwame was lucid, one of those unexpected gifts that came without warning and left the same way. He listened to everything, his hands around his teacup, his eyes clear, tracking her the way he used to when she was young and bringing him problems she didn't yet have language for. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You used your real voice," he said. "Go to the tea house. When someone sees you, you honor that." Hana no Yume did not exist online. No reviews, no address on any app, nothing. Which itself told her something about the world Tanaka inhabited. She found it anyway. A traditional space tucked into little 5 points like a secret the neighborhood had agreed to keep. Wood and silence, and the smell of something ancient and considered. Tanaka stood when she entered. She noted it, filed it. "I investigated you," he said once they were seated. "Some of what happened at the UN is a matter of professional record. Known in interpreter circles, even if it was never corrected. The rest I confirmed through other means." He held her gaze steadily. "I know what Victoria Chen did. I know what they took and what it cost. I know you were the best." The job offer was Chief Language Officer. Real title, real authority. Her rate, she named it without apology. He agreed without negotiation. "I know what you are, Mr. Tanaka," she said. "Your business. Some of it is gray," he said. "What I offer you is not, and you will always be permitted to speak truth. I would not have it otherwise, not after last night." His third agreed, when she told him she would walk if that changed, came out quieter than the others. Like something he meant in a register that had nothing to do with business. Outside, his assistant Yuki appeared at the door. "It's getting cold." Imani laughed. Genuinely, without planning it. The laugh came from somewhere that had been locked in the same room as her 8 languages, equally untouched, equally patient. Tanaka watched her with complete attention. Not the attention of a man cataloging an asset. The attention of a man witnessing something he hadn't expected and didn't want to look away from. Something began. Neither of them named it. The tea grew warm between them, and outside Atlanta continued, and inside the tea house that didn't exist online. Two people who had both learned to survive complicated worlds sat together in unusual quiet, and neither of them reached for their phone. 3 weeks. The Brazilian negotiation was $200 million, and Luis Mendes told her afterward, in Portuguese, that he had never felt so understood in a business setting. She thanked him in Portuguese, then relayed his words to Tanaka in Japanese, and watched Tanaka's expression do the small, quiet thing it did when she was precise, a particular stillness, like recognition. Small things had accumulated across those 3 weeks, with the patience of tide. He stood every time she entered a room. Always. Without performance, without announcement. Just stood, the way people do when they believe the gesture matters. He knew her tea, had learned it somewhere, the specific preparation, and never made the error of abbreviating her name the way Westerners often did. The Nigerian syllables in his mouth were careful, considered, like something he had practiced. He listened when she spoke, not the listening of a man waiting for his turn, the full kind, the kind that made you say more than you intended. He had restructured 2 meetings around her obligations without being asked, and without mentioning it. She'd found out from Yuki and hadn't known what to do with the information, so she'd carried it quietly. When Bradshaw's people had made noise about her credentials, she'd heard this secondhand. Tanaka had responded with a precision that ended the conversation permanently. After the Brazilian negotiation, he handed her an envelope. Inside, a card. Just a card. "There is something I want to say," he told her. "I don't have English words for it." Yuki could translate. "No." He said it gently. "Some things must be said in the language they were born in." A pause. "And when we are alone. Hiroshi, please." She carried the envelope to Piedmont Park, found an oak tree with the particular quality of permanence she needed, and sat beneath it and opened the card. 4 characters. Anata ga jian eru, anata ga mieru. She knew the translation. She sat with it anyway, let it move through her in all 8 languages, and in none of them did it diminish. Every tongue arrived at the same impossible thing. I see you. Not I want you. Not I need you. Not even I love you, which can be said in 100 directions and mean entirely different things. I see you. To someone who had spent years becoming invisible. To someone who had been made into a ghost by a woman who found her easy to erase. To someone who had perfected the art of disappearing so thoroughly she'd nearly lost the thread back to herself. I see you was not a beginning. It was the thing that made beginnings possible. Her phone rang. She knew before she looked. She answered. Hiroshi. His name in her mouth for the first time. She heard his breath catch. A small human sound from a man who occupied dangerous rooms without flinching. You can't write things like this, she said. He was quiet for a moment. I have been in every room where something could go wrong, he said finally. I have never been as afraid as I am right now. She understood that. She was made of that exact fear, in the particular terror of having something to lose again. I'm going to see my father, she said. And then, she left it open. The unfinished sentence hung there between Atlanta and wherever he was, and it held everything she couldn't say yet, and everything she would. I will wait, he said. She ended the call, held the card. 4 characters pressed against her palm, warm from her hand, and she thought, Kwame will be lucid today. I feel it. She thought, I have a salary and a title, and work that is real. She thought, someone knows my name in 8 languages and is afraid of me the way I am afraid of him. She stood. The oak tree was solid at her back. Atlanta moved around her. Traffic and evening birds and the city's enormous indifferent life. And she moved through it with something lighter in her chest than she'd carried in years. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet. Something better. Something more durable. She was visible. She was here. She was, after a long and costly silence, entirely herself. And this story, hers finally, in her own voice, was just beginning.